There was a father who had two sons, and the first son he had, which was a few years older than the other son, began his life strong, and he was an easy child to begin with. He always wanted to please. He did things well. He thought well. He did well at school. He was athletic. He made friends easily. He did those things that his father wanted him to do. He accomplished those things early on and through his life that his father was glad to see him accomplish. It made him very happy. He was an easy boy to love. And the son that came along a few years after this first son was different in nearly every way. He began his life with difficulty. He was born premature, and he spent several weeks in the neonatal intensive care unit with his parents, wondering if he was ever even going to come home. When he did come home, he was a young baby that was never content. He cried all the time. He was colicky. He was difficult from the start. And he wasn't strong like his brother. He wasn't athletic. He didn't find that school was easy, that academics were easy. He wasn't as quick to be obedient or to listen, to do what his parents expected. He was more rebellious in nature. And this made it harder for his parents to love him, and for his father especially, it made it hard for him to not favor the one over the other, but he loved them both dearly, and he did his very best to love them both equally. And the brothers loved each other. They took care of each other. The older brother looking after the younger, and the younger looking up to the older and always wanting to do things with him and do things for him. He idolized him. He wanted to be just like him. When the older brother went off to college, the younger brother began to drift. At school, he fell into crowds that he wouldn't have fallen into if his brother had been there to look after him at school and to guide him and to keep him going on the right course. He began to hang out with people who weren't interested in being at school, much less doing well at school. He began to spend his time with people who instead were interested in using drugs and trying to have sex with other people. And the younger brother was drawn to these new sensual and psychological experiences. They felt spiritual, even at times. And without his brother around, he gravitated towards wanting to spend time doing these things. To spend time with these people. And whenever he was at home, all he did was try to avoid spending time with his father, with his mother. And he only looked forward to the time when he could escape and start doing these sorts of things. It became his drive and his purpose in life. And one time, whenever he was out with these friends of his, they were discussing leaving their families and going to Las Vegas where they thought that they would be able to find jobs and they could live for themselves and do what they want, and they wouldn't have to worry about school, and they wouldn't have to worry about going to college, and they wouldn't have to worry about anyone's expectations of them. And some of them made a plan, and they said, what we're going to do is we're going to sell whatever we have. And we're going to steal from our parents if we have to make this happen. And it won't matter because we're never coming back. Now the younger brother knew that his father had been storing up and saving gold coins for years that he was putting aside for his brother's college education and for his own. That this is what he had to pay for it. It was tens of thousands of dollars worth of gold coins. That night, when he went home after his parents were asleep, he went to his father's safe and he took all of it. And he left. And he met up with his friends in Las Vegas. What they didn't realize is none of them were able to get jobs because they were all drug users. And they all had drugs in their bodies. And in the first few weeks, the younger brother would take one coin to the pawn shop at a time to get through the week and try to get a job. Eventually, he stopped trying to get a job and he started using drugs all day, all the time. And he started using heroin. And within the course of 4 months, those tens of thousands of dollars were all gone, and he found himself in a methadone clinic, looking in the mirror at his half-dead face. And he thought to himself, I can either kill myself, I can be done with all of this, because I don't have a chance out here on my own. This is either the end. I have nobody and I have nothing. Or I could go home and I could ask my father to help me back on my feet, and I could promise him that I would pay him back as well as I could. And as soon as I could. So he decided that's what he would do. And he hitchhiked back. And he had the person that had picked him up drop him off a few blocks away from his house. And he tried to clean himself up the best he could. But his cheeks were sunken in, and his eyes had dark black rings around them. He hadn't shaved since he left. And he knew he looked like the Walking Dead, and he didn't know what his father was going to say when he saw him. He didn't know that every night since he left, his father had been praying to God that his son would come home. He'd been losing sleep every night, waiting for a phone call that never came. And that night, as that young boy was walking home, a broken, half-dead young man that had nothing was walking back. His father was praying that God would bring him home. And as the boy approached his house, it seemed odd to him that nothing had changed. His whole life at that point felt like it had changed, that everything was different. In the lawn, in the house, in the mailbox, in the car in the driveway, it all looked the same. And he was so ashamed at what he had done to himself and to his family that he was about to turn back because he couldn't face it. He couldn't face the reality of that. And then the front door opened. And he saw his father step out, and his father looked down the road the opposite direction. And he realized his father was getting ready to turn and look right at him. And he couldn't meet his gaze. He looked at the ground. And the next thing he knew, he heard footsteps running towards him. And he looked up and he saw his father crying and running at him with his arms open. And he started to try to explain to his dad what had gone through his mind and why he did what he did. But his dad was already calling to his mom and his brother who were inside to come out and see him. He didn't want to hear any of it. He just was so thankful that he had his son back in his arms. And later on, after things had calmed down and his mom had gotten him a sandwich, he heard his dad and his brother talking in the next room. And his brother sounded angry. His brother was telling his dad how his brother had ruined his life, how he didn't have money to go to school now, and how he had worked so hard. And how his dad should be angry. And he heard his dad say, "Son, you've worked very hard. And you deserve to go to school. And I'm going to do everything that I can to help you in this life and help you do that. But if your brother wasn't here right now, he would be dead. Rejoice with me, he is home and he is alive." As the younger son heard this in the kitchen, he began weeping, and he knew in his heart that it was never his father or his family that pushed him away or pushed him to do any of these things. It was his own heart. And he knew in that moment how much his father loved him, and that he would never do anything to betray his trust or that love ever again.